Health and wellness are more than a destination. They are a process and a journey of personal choice. Come hear from people out in the field, doing the work, bringing health and wellness to many.
Hello, everyone. I'm so delighted to have Pete Heibloom. Now, Pete's story is so wonderful because it's so relatable to so many people out there. And that's what I love about you, Pete. And I feel really excited about this interview today because I know that what you've been through, so many people can relate to. You're like an owner of a business in insurance, really mainstream out there, just doing your work. You showed up every day. You didn't maybe understand what our whole reason for being here was at that time, but you had a good intention to do what you were doing to the best of your ability because you worked in insurance and you help people very much. But along the way, you started to ask questions. And I'm not going to actually tell all of your story because I think it's so much better from you. But I just really am grateful that you're here today. And I'm sure the audience will gain a lot from this. So would you tell a little bit about your background and maybe how you have come to this beautiful new organization that you now have created?
Oh, well, thank you for the very kind introduction, Kathleen. I appreciate it. And it's great to be able to share, with the audience, because I feel like nowadays more and more people are starting to question, there must be more to life than this, like making money, trying to be the healthiest, happiest, if you're a real high achiever, to trying to have all the balance in your life. But even if you are doing that very, very well, there can still sometimes be an underlying wondering or an underlying search for meaning, for a sense of purpose. And I was very much like that. I'd gone down the path of personal development. Gone along with the Tony Robbins motivational seminars, and I set goals. I was fit and healthy, and I was working on the business, and I had a family, and things were going well, so to speak, for us. Financially and lifestyle wise, and etc. Things weren't perfect, but they were pretty good, compared to, let's say, someone who was struggling. We weren't struggling. I mean, like everyone who runs their own business, we were time poor. The phone could ring 7 days a week, right? As an insurance broker, you can't have your phone on silent on a Sunday. No. It's always on. So there were things like that. But really what happened is my brother had this massive shift. He'd worked on tugboats, and he had a very good job, right? For 3 weeks on, 3 weeks off. And he makes this announcement after going to this retreat that he's returned, and he's like this new guy, right? He's younger than me, and he was enthusiastic. And we were all quite shocked over a big family dinner when he announced, and I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to do something else because I just don't find fulfillment anymore. I don't agree with what the company's doing in terms of digging minerals out of the ground and dragging them out to ships and sending them all over the world. And he said, and most importantly, I feel like I'm selling half of my life for money. 3 weeks on, 3 weeks off. And we were all shocked initially. However, I could feel the energy of excitement for him. And basically, he lived the furthest place you could live from us. We're in Queensland in Australia. He was way over in Perth. And yeah, he packed everything up and he returned home. And Roxy and I started asking more about what he'd gone through. And eventually in that process, we decided to follow in that same journey that he had gone through to have these realizations. And really, to cut a long story short, on the way home from the exact same retreat, Roxy and I were looking at one another on the aeroplane going, I just find it so difficult to think that I'm about to go back home and sell insurance again. It's like, I don't think we can do it. And we looked at one another and we were thinking, we were shocked at the words that were coming out of our mouth, because it was like, well, what are we going to do? But as I'll share with people as we go through the interview, when we just learnt to trust and to get out of the head and sort of move more from the heart and from spirit, we were able to sell off that insurance brokerage that we'd built up, and we started Awakening Education, knowing nothing about YouTube. We didn't have a YouTube channel. We didn't have a single subscriber. We'd never made a movie or produced anything. We had never really done anything to do with spirituality. Yet who would think now that 4 years later we've got over 40,000 subscribers on our YouTube channel. We've done a part TV series which has gone out around the world on elevating consciousness, and we've got more to come. We've got projects that we're working on right away, and things have just blossomed. And it's a new, Kathleen, what I love about this is it's like the new energy of spirituality is different. The old energy of a spiritual person was, they lived in the back of a van, and maybe they had dreadlocks and tribal tattoos.
They were weird. They were someone that we couldn't really, they weren't grounded.
Yeah, they got no money, they're struggling, all of that. And look, for those, some people are absolutely wonderful and they're going down that path, and that's beautiful. But what I'm finding more and more is that as spirituality evolves, because the energy is live, so the energy is evolving and constantly changing, and I'm noticing that more and more, let's call it mainstream people, more and more normal. It's hard to say what's normal, of course, because I've kind of never really felt normal, and it took me a long time to actually say that in public. But because all I ever wanted was to fit in. And it was like the day where I finally realized, you know what, I'm not normal and I've just got to own it. It was such a big relief. Oh, okay, well, I can just relax now and be me. And that's kind of led Roxy and I on this amazing journey.
Well, I have to say this. I have to say this. Many, many people feel what you felt, but they don't dare because they're so afraid to be honest, because if they were honest, then they could be rejected. And then that's their deepest fear, right? That they're going to disappoint people, that they're going to not live up to a certain expectation. I think we all feel that. I felt that too. But I think that if people are listening out there and you feel this is so very normal. This is so normal. And it's also part of us waking up, right, Pete? This is really part of it. You can maybe share a little bit about what was your awakening? What does that mean, that word? Because you use it in your title, Awakenings Education, which I love.
Yeah. Well, depends how you look at it, but the awakening can be on lots of different levels. To put it really simply, when you're personally awake, and I'll say it like that because there are some people who are socially awake to the corruption, to the coercion, to the manipulation and the pulling of the strings behind closed doors, and they get angry about it and they post it on their Facebook or their YouTube or their whatever they are, and they're like the freedom fighters.
They're awakening to something that they're seeing that they don't like.
Yes. And I feel that you can't win a war on consciousness through battling, right? Getting angry doesn't help. And, going on and on with getting upset or triggered by what's going on in the state of the world doesn't help. What helps is to transform oneself into the opposite of that. So by individuals, because really the collective consciousness is just a reflection of the majority of the individuals. This is why the Great Awakening is so very, very important, because as individuals like you and I understand that we are not our thoughts, we are not our body, we are not the old stories that we've been told, we're not the conditioning from our parents, we're not the traumatic things that have happened to us in our life. Once we wake up and really realize that we're actually a soul in a human physical body, having an experience to learn, that's what I call the spiritual awakening. And through that awakening process, we learn to know thyself and love thyself, and hopefully then begin to see the infinite creator in everything that we have manifested to that point, because we are actually creator beings. And we've always been told, any book you read on motivation, on personal power, talks about how we might only be using 5 or 10% of our natural ability. So we've got so much more potential inside us. And the key to being able to tap into that is to be able to raise our vibration. See, our vibrational state influences, depending on what words you follow, your timeline, influences your law of attraction, and influences your ability to make things happen in your life. You become like a living magnet where all of the things sort of attract to you, rather than the old way, which I used to be. It was through hard work, discipline, goal setting, sacrificing, going without. People talk about the hustle.
Yeah, so these old belief systems were the base or the foundation of your whole life, because you're creating it even if you're not aware. So the minute you changed those thoughts, your frequency changed. And when your frequency, because it's all frequency, but people are not taught about this. We were not taught about this. And quantum physics and new sciences are really showing us this reality is true. So everything, even this stone, is a frequency. It looks solid, but it's not, right? So we need to wake up to this realization before we can. If I found myself that understanding that mechanism helps people to understand what's happening, because it's kind of overwhelming, right? When you talk about frequency, when people haven't been really taught about it, they haven't been taught that. They've been actually so focused on their physical reality, right? This is our generation, and maybe a little bit yours, although yours started to change a bit. But the physical reality, like what you said, I go to work, I work hard, I need to earn money, I need to bring this home so I can, and it's very survival oriented. So maybe share a little bit about the difference, like what that means to understand and live understanding that you are frequency.
Well, what you just described is how, what they say, most people are completely living out of the bottom 3 chakras or energy centers. They're out of survival, safety, money, etc., the root chakra, or they're out of primal desire, right, and craving, and etc., manifested through their sacral. And of course, to varying degrees, whether they're experiencing laziness, procrastination, or overachievement in order to fill some sort of void or lack within, they just operate in those lower 3 chakras, believing that that is going to give them all that they need. Occasionally, they have moments of joy and happiness, which may be fleeting or almost seem to fall through their fingers, because underneath the operation of those 3 lower chakras are all these patterns and false beliefs, and root causes is what Roxy and I have learned to identify for people, helping people to identify the underlying root cause, which is manifesting itself out in their life as whatever it is: depression, anxiety, overachievement, the inability to be able to hold a relationship or to be able to really open up or to achieve any sort of success. It comes from a false belief. It's rooted down underneath that. Could be an intergenerational pattern or some sort of pain that the person's had in their own life. And often over and over and over, they try and solve it through the bottom three chakras, looking outside themselves. So they find a new boyfriend or a new girlfriend or a new job, or they get a better car, or they live in a bigger house.
It fulfills you instantly, but not forever.
That's right. And eventually they're back where they started, and they're like, oh, no, this time I'll go to an energy healer, right? They go to the energy healer, and the energy healer helps them with whatever it is, the tightness in their back, their anxiety, their insomnia, or whatever the issue may be. But unless they get to the root cause, it's going to return over and over and over again. So what we've found for Roxy and myself helped to make such a massive difference was learning this principle of being able to zero in on the underlying root causes of where our imbalances are, physically, emotionally, mentally, even spiritually. And once you understand what those are and you can shine some light on them and have some awareness, then you move into balance, opening up your heart more. And then, of course, when you've got balance in those lower three chakras and your heart's open, then you're able to speak more from truth and integrity and own it. But if you start there while you've still got root causes down in your lower three chakras, that's the fear that you mentioned earlier, what we were talking about. So many people are too scared to say anything. Well, that's because as a child, they were rejected if they had an amazing imagination, or they were told to shush up because they talked too much because they were all enthusiastic. The magic of childhood got squashed and put out. So in their throat chakra, there's a block, and now they want to speak, but there's some sort of overwhelming pattern holding them inside. They've got stuff down there in those lower three chakras. So there's a method of opening them up. And if you open them up enough, turn on the third eye, you turn on your crown. This is what a Kundalini awakening is that people talk about. You hear about this, the energy moving up the spine, people talking about the feeling of divinity, the feeling of a touch of enlightenment, like the grace from an angelic touch or something of that nature. But there is a process of moving the energy up the spine.
What you're saying right now is so important because you can get it in many ways, right? We can awaken in many ways. It's not one way. You can have a traumatic event. You can become ill. You can have things happen in your life that are your turning point. That is the point where you're going to start to release some of these blockages because you have to. It's like, it can be sudden, like you said, like a sudden thing with this energy rising, but it can also be that you're going to have to face a battle with a cancer or with something like an automobile accident you have to recover from. Or I'm just giving examples because I'm a nurse. I've seen so many things. But I agree with you that what I want everyone to hear is that it doesn't have to always, sometimes it's not all in a second, this chakra is released. Sometimes it's a process, But I'm curious, okay, so this is really interesting. So this awakening is happening all around the world now. It is the time. It's a beautiful time on the planet. We have no idea how amazing the new earth that's coming to us is just so unbelievable. We can't even imagine it. That's what I think. But I'm wondering, you had your own awakening, and maybe it's nice if you share that, because I think that is also a beautiful story, Pete.
Well, yeah. So the reality of this story that I talk about is the reality of needing to go in and find my underlying root causes. So for me, I was taken to a time at 5 years of age, and at 5 years of age is where, I split from my soul. It's like damage happened to my heart that for many, many years was never addressed. And this is so common for people. They have some sort of loss, trauma, abuse, neglect, etc. And there's no debrief. There's no counseling session. There's no one there to help a young one navigate their way through it. So that stuff gets shoved down in the dungeon and no one talks about it. And certainly in the old, there was this in families, there was often this silence on issues. This had gone on, that gone, no one talks about it. Someone has a fight with someone else, no one talks about it. You're not allowed to talk about this, you're not allowed to talk about that. And to a greater extent, old patterns around love can be very traumatic for children. The withdrawal of love as a punishment, or no love at all, starved of any sort of recognition, encouragement, like a young child just wanting to see their parents' face light up in delight at just seeing them be them. And some poor little children never have that. So for myself, it was an event. I was 5. It had been raining heavily, and I took my little sister, who was just over 2.5 on her way to 3. I took her for a walk down the road to the nearby stream, see how high the water was. And we were standing on the bridge watching the water rage underneath this bridge, and she fell off the bridge into the stream and disappeared. She drowned. And immediately I went into panic. I'd have to go home and tell my mother, what's she going to say? You know, I knew we weren't supposed to go down to the creek. I knew I wasn't supposed to take her down there. Now this has happened. And the pain of remembering that event was I didn't run home like the wind. I walked home slow because I was scared. And for me to have to address guilt and shame and disgust in myself in a certain way, and a false belief was in me that, let's say I was born and I was like this beautiful, perfect china plate, and in that moment it had been smashed. And I had this underlying feeling that now that it had been smashed, it doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter how good you are at gluing, or how expensive the glue is, or the master craftsman that you get in there to help repair that beautiful china plate. It's never the same. So I had this underlying false belief that I had wrecked my life, like it was stuffed, and it could never be what it should have been or could have been because of this event. So this manifested itself, therefore, in me trying to cover that up by pleasing people, particularly women, right? Please the school teacher, please my mother, please all adults generally, though. So I would always, like, people pleasing was just a trait in my personality, to the point where I would volunteer to do things that I didn't even want to do to make people like me. I would avoid conflict, stay away from conflict, and I was painfully shy around women. So I almost went all the way through school, never had a girlfriend. And it wasn't really until university when my mind got strong enough and I realized that I could fake it till I make it, right? That I pretended to be confident and to have it all together. And eventually I started, you know, getting some girlfriends and navigating my way through that. But it wasn't long after university that I got one of my girlfriends pregnant. And there I am, the same pattern that I was born with, that I've now picked up and realized was a pattern that happened for myself with my parents, same energy flow. I know we're not talking about karmic energy flows really today, but I have seen the same pattern, intergenerational. So I get this girl pregnant. I know she's not the one. I know it's not meant to be, but there's all this pressure from the family, good Catholic family. Now, mum and dad are saying you've got to do the right thing by the girl, but now I realise, really, they cared what their friends thought. They cared what the aunties and uncles would say, what the grandparents would say. They were thinking of themselves, not of me. Anyway, I get married. If I still haven't worked on my female issues, Kathleen, then I have three daughters. So I'm trying to please the ex-wife. I'm trying to please the 3 daughters, please my mother, please this female, that female. Didn't even realize that all of that issue was manifesting itself physically. I had broken my left toe, my left foot, my left arm, my left finger, and the left side of the body is said to be the feminine aspect, right?
It was needing some attention.
everything down that side. And it's like when I had the awakening and I went within myself to like self-purify, to spiritually balance, all of those issues came to the surface. Like I didn't even like to talk about my childhood. You know, you could grab me at 18 or 20 years of age. If someone says, oh, you're one of four boys, say, oh, your mum and dad never got a daughter. Oh, it's like a knife in my stomach. And I had to decide how I'd handle that. So the whole life, whenever anyone mentioned, so what's it like being the eldest of four boys, right? It's like any talk of that, I never liked. You can just imagine it was all bottled in me, bottling out, you know, and it's like down the bottom there in a volcano. And for some people, they've got their own unique, let's call it trauma or issue, but that stuff stays in them their whole life, bubbling away, and it festers, manifesting itself in the cancers or the panic attacks or the anxiety or the depression, in the alcoholism, the etc., etc. And by being able to identify and go to your darkest parts and address them, shine the light on them, as I mentioned in the beginning, actually learn to love them and clear them. It's like now I realize that I wouldn't be talking to you on this call right now if what had happened with my sister hadn't have happened. I wouldn't be married to Roxy. Now I've got Xavier and Harley, the two boys, where I'm telling my story openly and I'm actually able to speak about it without sort of getting all weird and breaking down, because it's not a sob story. It's a beautiful story. But I had to work on that as a soul. That's what I came in. That was my mission.
Yeah. So in other words, I really want to say something here. You, first of all, thank you. That is a very intense trauma. So, I mean, I don't think there can be anything worse. You were so young, like you said, so vulnerable, and then this happened. But yet, nothing really is an accident. So we think things just happen, but actually sometimes the happening is our gift. Like the hardest thing that we have to go through is actually the thing that will cause the awakening, like what we were saying at the beginning. So this thing that was stuck in you for all those years, this guilt, this remorse you brought in the first marriage and all these issues, was never resolved. So I'm curious now, how did you go from that stuck point? Because I'm sure everyone on this interview is wondering, how did you get from there besides the story? Because you told the story of your brother, but there has to be something more because you actually healed it, right? You have healed it.
Look, for myself, what I found helped me the most to really quickly zero in on these things was the plant medicines. And the retreat that my brother went to was this 5-day ayahuasca retreat in Costa Rica. And these plant medicines have this ability to be able to, it's like show you the unhealed parts of yourself. It's like nature wants to move us into balance. And in the West, in civilized societies, we're so disconnected from nature, hence we're disconnected from balance, which can be represented in we're disconnected from ourselves. So it was through this ceremony where really I was shown where all these splits in my soul were, all these wounds to my heart were throughout life. And it's quite graphic and confronting and difficult at the time. However, what I worked out very, very quickly is once you feel it, you can heal it. Once you can go to what's the underlying issue and really feel into it and see it from almost like a 5D perspective, because these wonderful plant medicines have been shown to affect the frequency of the brain. So they can move us into a very high frequency, what's called gamma brain state. And the gamma brain state almost enables each and every one of us to become the observer of ourselves. And the first intention of this retreat was the intention of show me who I have become. And the show me who I have become is beautiful, but we're not perfect, right? No one's perfect. So when she shows you who you have become, this beautiful, and it's Mother Gaia, Pachamama, Mother Ayahuasca, this plant spirit shows you where you're out of alignment with balance. You're out of alignment with truth and with who you really are. And you can begin to quickly see where your false beliefs are and work on those and correct the errors. But you can also realize, like I had to realize, that I'm not all broken. Sometimes people think, I don't know if I'm going to ascend in this lifetime. I've just had so much trauma, so they've got this illusion that they're too broken or they're lost. It's like, I think I'm too lost. I'm too far gone. And that's never the case. A burning desire is what is within the soul of many of these people who are having awakenings. It's like, very much, I feel like for myself, I was like dry wood, and the spark of the awakening just erupted this fire that was lying there latent within. And it was like the thought of doing insurance, I was just allergic to it. It was within 12 months, we had packaged up that business and sold it and moved on to something that I knew nothing about.
But you had the desire because you had completely shifted out of your story and you had healed it. Now there's one part I've heard over and over again, and I myself have had an awakening, but in a much different way. We all have. But I would say that I'm curious about this trauma, because I think people have to understand that trauma can exist multidimensionally. So it can exist physically, mentally, or spiritual, or all at the same time. So I think when you lost your little sister, it probably affected you on all levels, but definitely you said there was a soul sort of such a tremendous shock to the soul that there was almost like a numbness occurred to feel, an emotional block. So I'm curious, I think it's important for the audience they might not understand trauma and how powerful it is. And by the way, I work with people all the time, so there are definitely big T's. What you have shared is a big T. It doesn't always have to be a big T. It can be a little T, right? Like I'm verbally abused by my father or something. That can also be a trauma. It's all perception. But maybe you explain, because now you've been working for many years and helping people with traumas. I'm curious how you can explain that.
The soul split that you were talking about can, for a lot of people, happen very, very early in their life, is what I've now come to find with myself. So I talked about the pattern that I picked up in my mother's womb, which I now see as the pattern that my eldest daughter has. And it's the pattern of picking up from the mother and father that you're not really wanted. Now, that's hard when you're a pure little soul that's come into this embryo. Let's say that you've heard the clarion call to come into the earth at this time. It's the time of the great awakening. And you move from this oneness and this love and this interconnectedness of the higher realms. You shrink yourself down, forgetting all of these powers and gifts that you've worked on many, many times, shrinking yourself down into this little spark, this embryo, and you're like a sponge. And as you go into the mother's stomach, you're soaking up everything that happened. Research has shown that sound gets amplified in the mother's womb many times over. They also show that the emotions of the mother go straight into that baby. And how many people here watching this, when they think about that, would probably know what was going on for their mum and dad when they were in their mother's womb. And for some little souls, it's too much. And you know what they think? Get me the heck out of here. Can I go back up there?
This isn't safe here.
So sometimes people go through their life and they feel like they don't belong here. Like a lot of people can sort of discuss that feel. I feel like I'm from somewhere else, or I'm not all here, or part of me seems to be missing, I don't know what that is. So it can start way back then in the timeline and then jump to for the next one for me. And then other people can have 2, 3, 4 years of age, soul splits, 7, 8, 9.
It just keeps repeating.
Yeah, different things happen. And the soul split can manifest itself, or the trauma can manifest itself physically, emotionally, and mentally. But often it's an entanglement of all of it. Yeah? So it's like, let's take the example of sabotage thinking. I'm not good at that, like people's internal dialogue. So the mind, the brain, the internal dialogue, they can't take a compliment. Someone gives them a compliment, they can't take that compliment. It's like, oh, you look lovely in that color. Oh, this old thing. Oh, no, this is horrible. This is terrible. It's like they push it away. So they're pushing that away, and they're constantly telling themselves they're not good enough. They're not good enough. But the emotion in behind that is probably starting way back, let's say in the beginning, they didn't even feel wanted when they were in their mother's womb, which is exactly the one I had. And a lot of people can relate to that. Look, and some parents, God bless them, call the little one a surprise rather than a mistake, and that makes it easier. But the energy flow is still there, you know what I mean? It'd much rather be a surprise. Everyone likes a surprise, and no one likes to make a mistake. But the energy flows there. Or then you go through life, and there's these things I talked about, the withdrawal of love as a punishment, mum and dad being absent, or just starving the child of any love or attention.
Trying to do the hard work, trying to go to work just to put the food on the plate, and then they don't mean to even. They just are distracted so much.
Stuck in the bottom 3 chakras, like we talked about earlier, in survival mode, right? And they've are doing the best they can, but it's very, very difficult for them. So, of course, this then plays out for that person in these different patterns that they scramble to try and understand, but very much like themselves are going to continually repeat. So this is where your traumas influence your law of attraction. Because if you don't work on your root causes, life and your soul is going to continue to give you whatever it is. Cheating partners, dodgy, business partners, overbearing bosses, health conditions.
It's energy that's so out of balance, and that's where you're attracting to. So the energy actually seeks resolution, right? Ultimately, we want to heal that trauma. So you're going to get all stories in your life that show up to say, look, this is the mirror. You got to heal because this is where you're at. You're the creator, but right now you're only acting out of survival, true? So then I'm going to give you a story where you have to look at that again. But I want to say something. So I just want to clarify. So I totally agree with you on the multidimensional aspect of trauma, and that I believe it sits in our bodies and our minds and our souls. It just does. And once it's stuck, it's stuck. But I'll give you an example. My son, he probably had that feeling, but he had it at birth because he couldn't fit through the birth canal. And there was such a traumatic birth for him. 2 days of just horrible. And I felt terrible. And I was really, really sick. And then he became sick. And then at birth, he was physically separated from me for a day and a half before I could even. So imagine you hear this mother's voice. It seems good. Everything's calm. And then you have that physical trauma. So it can also be physical. That was really dramatic for him. So his next subsequent years, he was ill physically because of the same thing you're talking about, but it was initiated by this physical thing that happened, where when he entered planet Earth, he was not safe. So I think what you're saying is anything that causes you to disassociate or disconnect on any of those levels because you have had something really shocking that makes you feel unsafe in those lower 3 chakras affecting who you are, then that is a trauma.
That's right. And there's no comparing, we don't need to sit and compare one person to someone else because, Yeah, and one of the most unloving things that someone could ever say to another person is to tease them or make fun of them that they got upset about something. It's like if the person was affected by it, then honor the person saying that. There is very much, particularly in Australia, this energy of, oh, you know, just harden up, you know, get on with it.
Yeah, that's very British.
Yeah, there's like this saying something like, you take a big spoon of concrete and harden up and just get on with it.
Against survival.
So, yeah, suffer in silence. Don't be a sook. Don't be a sook. That's error. We got to delete that. Like all of us as a society, we've got to delete talking like that, running one another down. Words are powerful.
We've been programmed with our words. It's not a easy thing.
And the words in here, this internal dialogue.
Yeah, you talked about genetically. I think that's important to mention here. You talk that we sometimes inherit these belief systems, these ways of thinking. We repeat what our parents did until we can heal it. So basically, Pete, you have become, well, I don't want to say like a healer, because I think you believe what I believe, that people have to, in the end, heal themselves. But you are I would say you hold the space, right, in your new work for people to do this work, this very important work. So can you share with the audience what that is? How do you help people to heal their traumas? Because now we've kind of determined what they are, but they're very much root causes.
So as we were working on ourselves, Roxy and I, after coming back from this retreat, we basically did everything we could. Like we went to see all of these different people, lowering heart walls, doing rebirthing, meeting back with the inner child, like etc. Everything we could, because we just were so passionate about sort of moving towards being the best version of ourselves. And the more we worked with this, the more our vibration went up. And the more our vibration went up, the more we actually felt like we were being divinely guided, like divinely helped. And at the time, I didn't really think too much of it when these events were happening. But as a child, I had an imaginary friend. And this imaginary friend was, now I realize, a being, a Pleiadian being that was guiding me and had been with me throughout my life. So when I actually split from my soul, listening to my mother slumped on the floor in the bathroom, like crying and retching into the toilet over the death of my sister, so painful was it that part of like my soul split. The memory of that was that this blue being was there with me, comforting me and guiding me through and reassuring me that was all part of some sort of divine plan that at that time I didn't understand, but now I do understand. And so Roxy and I now work with high vibrational beings like the Pleiadians or the Arcturians or the Archangels, high vibrational beings that are trying to help humanity through this shift in consciousness. Because actually, just like on the planet, we think of ourselves as individuals, human beings or the earth thinks of itself as an individual, but really we're a small part of one big whole. And right now, humanity is going through a shift, but this shift helps the Milky Way galaxy. And the Milky Way galaxy is the masculine aspect of the quantum, of energy, the feminine being the Andromedan galaxy. So the merging of the two, the masculine and the feminine, the male and the female, is what ushers in what they call the golden age, the age of enlightenment. So it is necessary for us as humanity to be able to move past this overly masculine society that we've got. You think about it, there's so much masculine out there, and like for some people it would drive them crazy. So if you're watching this and you're a particularly sensitive person, then 3D people, right? Low energy people, low energy rules being put on, put on hold for 50 minutes for a big company, doing bureaucratic paperwork, or even the feeling of doing mundane jobs where people think, gosh, I just didn't come in here to do this stuff. I came in here for more, and they say it in the heat of the moment. It's a reflection, really, that they know that we are moving toward this higher level of consciousness. So what Roxy and I do is actually help people to be able to identify where the root causes of their trauma, their pain, their false beliefs lie, and then in conjunction with their higher self, because our most sacred thing is our free will. In conjunction with our free will, the person can get led to where the false belief, the block, the density, the trauma may lie, and they use their free will to release it, to shine the light on it, to understand it, and to move through it. And people can then find that this manifests itself in a change physically, or it manifests itself in a change emotionally, and all of a sudden they start smiling again, or they open their heart. There's a lot of people, their heart's like a block of concrete, and they're all shut down. And they don't laugh much. They don't have generosity of spirit. And as you do this work, the more and more you learn to get out of your head and into your heart. And as you learn to move into the heart, we're balancing the masculine and the feminine. So from an energetic level, what this means to a person is they are happier. They're able to achieve more success in their goals. Like, when I think of the number of years it took me to build the insurance business compared to what it has taken to build this business to where we're at now, it's so much quicker. And I know nothing about digital marketing and all of these sorts of things, but I just find the right person at the right time. And even just very interesting, since I've spoken to you last, we've found that our series, The Portal to the Pleiadians, has been nominated for an award at the Cannes Film Festival over in France.
Listen, this is so crazy because you mentioned these other beings, and it is hard for many people to believe this because they haven't had that experience. But I always say, and this is really important for the viewers, if you are hearing this for the first time, because it can be shocking and we all can think, oh, this is crazy, this is just wild. But imagine that there was a time on Earth where we didn't even know we had cells in our body. We literally had no clue. And look at what we know now. So I think we have to decide as humans that we don't know everything. And once we have that agreement that we are still evolving, that we are still learning, then and only then can we be open to hear words like what you're sharing. There are obviously people in our audience that already know about this, or maybe they've had similar experiences. But there could be people that are just trying to find wellness that haven't had this or haven't even thought of this. So I just want to go back to that real quick. When you had these experiences with these blue beings, because this is so beautiful, obviously they gave you comfort and they were there as a guide. And perhaps we all have those kind of beings around us, but if we're not tuned in a way, we cannot have those connections, right? But you mentioned it. So I just am curious how these beings can help us.
The fact that a being is higher vibrational, we need to bring this back to the scale of consciousness. So there is a scale of consciousness. In other words, how awake we are, how aware we are, but it's technically called David Hawkins' scale of consciousness. And the critical level for where you move from being predominantly negative, let's call it, a negatively polarized being, lots of that on the planet, to predominantly more positive, and tip over that scale is the level of 220. So humanity as a collective moved over that line in 1988, and we moved into being slightly more positive than we are negative. Now, the scale is exponential. So in other words, someone operating at a level of 500 isn't twice as powerful or, you know, counterbalancing two people at 250. It's more like they're counterbalancing 200 people, because an exponential scale, with 1,000 being what, as far as they know, and Hawkins finishes the scale talking about merging back with source at the level of 1,000. So we're moving through levels of consciousness. Now, while it might seem strange to not believe in something that you can't see or hear, that's only if you forget that you've just got eyes that can only see between red and violet. I mean, just because you can't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. If you expand that using infrared goggles, you can see beyond red and faster than violet. If you use a radiation meter, you can measure energy or radiation coming from the cell phone, the TV screen, etc., etc. Can't see it with the eye, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It's just outside our level of perception. So throughout history, for thousands of years, in every single culture, from the middle of Africa to the tip of Alaska, these ancients have talked about in their stories and their mythology the spirits, the gods, the beings that have been guiding them, helping them, reassuring them. And every single culture all over the world talks about these beings. And when we just use, like, let's call it the Western Bible, it's full of talking about angels. It's everywhere. Angel here, angel there, right? And the wisdom, the guidance, always helping, always coming in to guide, to help, etc. And the negatively polarized aspect of the self gets called the terms that they talk about in the Bible, which is just calibrations below that level of 220. So when someone who's very in their head has this awakening, really what they're just getting used to is, first of all, the idea that they've got a soul. And if they don't think they've got a soul, well, think about the person who's in a coma, and at what point are they dead? Right? See, when the soul leaves the body, and this comes through in someone who's had near-death experiences, almost without exception, someone who's had a near-death experience will come back and talk about what's on that other side. And it's love, and it's unity, and it's togetherness, and there is so much support for the person they'll talk about. And what they almost always come back with is the fear of death completely being removed. It's like they no longer fear death. It's not that they look for death, but they're not scared of it. So there is a lot going on. And at the end of the day, a person's got free will. So part of this awakening that I love is that if someone just decides that it's a whole lot of rubbish and it's one big story, then they can go off and go down that path, and like, that's fine. Like, you do it. Let's see how they go with that.
Yeah, it serves them as long as it serves them.
Everyone's where they need to be. But for the people who are watching this and drawn to this sort of information, there's probably been a longing or a yearning in the person throughout their whole life. There's always been this feeling that there's something more. They know they're connected to something greater. And even for some of them, they realize that they're probably here for a real purpose. And this is where the term the light worker or the way shower comes in. Because as you clear your traumas, as you work on your false beliefs, and you become the higher vibrational expression of yourself, what you actually can do is it's still your normal day-to-day job. You don't have to go, I'm not saying to people do what I did and stop their job and go off and do that. Not necessary. But in your own workplace, in your own circle, everyone can be the light. You can counterbalance thousands of negatively polarized beings. You know, the poor souls in the Middle East at the moment, calibrating at a very low level, right? All of that is just a reflection of the collective consciousness of the planet. It's necessary for the Great Awakening to happen, for the pendulum to swing. So as that pendulum swings, we're going to see the darkness of what humanity is capable of, and we're going to see ever increasing numbers of people waking up and moving into their power This is the shift that happens when you move from 3D, the identification with the self, to 4D, hang on, we're all one, to 5D, which is the level of wisdom and seeing from above how all of that intermingles within it. And it's a very exciting time to be alive, because many of us will be able to move into that 5D consciousness in this lifetime.
Yeah, and it's very much about what you talked about, becoming more light, actually becoming, we have always been a light being, but we will be more and more. We'll carry more and more light in us, and as we allow that to happen. So if the soul is not ready, it won't do that, and that's okay. But if the soul is ready, and many light workers have always been ready, they came here with a higher frequency light, right? But they just literally, it was nuts. They were alone. Many of the light workers were not ever with people that were similar, because it's like, imagine poles of light needed to be placed all around the planet to help that frequency rise. And that is now happening. And so now the light workers can share and come out and say, yeah, this has been always my truth, but I didn't dare, or I didn't, but now I'm so happy to be connected. Like, I think even you and I connecting, we felt that camaraderie, that connection, I would say. But I think, and I'm so grateful for that, Pete. You and Roxy are wonderful. And I'm proud of what you're doing. I'm really excited for you. Now, I just want, for anyone who's listening, who is interested in your work, because I think it's wonderful. Can you share a little bit about your trainings, like what you offer to the people? And also, you obviously offer healings.
Yeah. So, look, our most popular program is guiding people through over like a 10-week program, and we check in week by week, and depending on our schedule, whether we're doing it twice a week, once a week, but it is what we did to get ourselves to where we are, how to identify where the soul splits are, how to identify where we got wounded in the heart, and find those root causes, those root energy flows, and clear them out. And whether the person is wanting to learn this process to be able to just help themselves shine more and to raise their vibration, which of course affects all of the areas of their life, their health, their prosperity, their vitality, their relationships, all improves. Or whether the person wants to learn this modality of how to actually raise your vibration, open a stargate or a portal, and transfer your consciousness through to a ship and lie a person down in a med bed and scan over them physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and be guided to where those imperfections are, and guide the client through in conjunction with their higher self, letting these things go, which is a true service to humanity. I've done probably 1,000 sessions like that now, of being able to help people through that. And the more I realize that everything else that's going on great for us, Roxy and I, in our life, is because you get everything you want in life when you help enough other people get what they want. So the more I'm helping the people to shine, then the more things just flow for us in our own life. So you can help yourself personally, but you can help like large groups of people in the practice or whatever. And that's called our How to Med course. So Roxy and I actually present that, and it's like the theory on a particular thing, because everyone's different. Like some people are very visual and other people are more feelers, and that's me, right? I'm empathetic. I can read a person, I can feel the room, but Roxy's very visual. She'll be up there and she'll be, oh, there's this Pleiadian came in and he said this and said that, and then he handed me a flower and like all this detail, and I'm like sitting there in the dark, And so it's the combination of us both that has made that probably like our most popular offering for people, because it's more that teach a person how to fish rather than just give them a fish type scenario. Do you know what I mean?
I know, because I also was so lucky to meet you years ago and have that experience in my own. I mean, I had awakened, but still, this was so beautiful because I also have had connections to other beings in a different way than you. But I also felt like I felt like, okay, if we're also, this is really important, it's etheric. So we have all those levels we exist on. So some of us will create a physical med bed, and that is coming. Believe me, there are more technologies coming in the next 10 years than we ever, and for healing and for energy and for all things, because we are in this new time. But this way you do it is really etheric, which is so beautiful. So for anyone who's very into that, I would highly recommend this experience with you.
And it's an amazing time to be alive because we can all connect through a Zoom call and we can talk to one another. There's some time differences, but you get the idea. We can talk to one another all over the world. And, you know, as you know, Roxy and I like to have fun with all of this. It's not super heavy and serious. We joke, we have fun, and we get to know everyone through this. And, you know, this is the new community as well. It's like the light workers are coming together. We're finding one another. And I think for so many of us, this was all lined up before we even came in. You know, it was lined up for these different things to happen and for us to find one another. And our role really is to help to hold stable when this great awakening comes. And Kathleen, I don't know if it's the 4 days of darkness or whether it's the earthquake or whether it's the solar flare, the financial crash, the World War III. It's like, name your disaster. But see, for me, it doesn't matter.
We are in it. Like solar flares are coming like crazy right now. This is also happening.
Yeah. So spaceweather.com for people who are interested in that. You can get messages on your phone. They tell you what the solar flares are doing, what the radiation levels are.
Yeah, I totally agree, because that is really happening. And that is really the last 3 years since COVID increased incredibly. So we can't deny that.
That's right. See, once they give us a shove like that, see, that was coercion. They were coercion. They were using false. Remember the pendulum. When they hit us with that, the swing in the other direction is a whole lot of light workers come online. And even though they did their best to try and dull down and squash and control vast numbers of the population, so many light workers came online at that time and went, no, something doesn't seem right. I don't know. It's like, and it's their throat, right? The throat chakra. It's like, this doesn't seem right. Justice, truth, integrity, all here in the throat. And people feel it. They're like, no, I'm not going to agree.
Honestly, for me, it was very simple. We're meant to live. I raise my family. I believe in a loving family. I believe in cohesiveness, helping each soul become the best version. And when I was in that story, I was thinking, how is this helping people become their best version? Well, indirectly, maybe they had it, that was part of their awakening. But truthfully, you know, I don't believe that our future will be all that much illness. I think we will be much farther in that of our ability to heal. And but anyway, I'm so grateful, Pete, for this time with you. I think you're amazing. I think you and Roxy are doing incredible work. It's a pleasure and an honor to be with you. And I just have one last question. Where do you see yourself going in the future?
I very much feel that Roxy and I are being guided to share our story in an even larger audience, and just bring, let's call it spirituality, the journey within, moving it more and more mainstream and making it normal, like replacing this out of balance that's so prevalent, that replacing, let's call it the dis-ease, the disease that's all around us, with more balance. You mentioned about how you feel like people will be healthier moving forward. Well, that's going to happen through them being able to move themselves back into balance. Because when we're in a state of balance, physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, we experience good health. But when you're experiencing good health and that vitality, then you're happier. and you're more effective in whatever you do in your day to day. And this leads to being more successful. So the old false beliefs that we get taught from parents or grandparents of scarcity, lack, right, struggle, and survival need to be replaced with realizing that the more high vibrational you become, the more abundance you attract. There is plenty to go around, and this ability to be able to manifest and be more successful as a person all comes through doing the inner work.
Oh, I thank you so much, Pete. And I wish you all the best. And yeah, I know we'll keep in touch. And I'm very grateful for today. And I want to thank our audience for being here today.
Thanks very much. I enjoyed my time with you.